Hey everyone, welcome back to Your Local Haunt, the podcast where I poke about in Britain's creepiest corners, drag out the history, the hauntings, and the sort of stories that'll make you think twice about booking that cute little inn for the weekend. I'm your host, Scott. I've still got a cold, but we push on. And today we're travelling to the heart of Gloucestershire, England, to explore a building that's often been called the most haunted house in Britain. A place where centuries of history, bloodshed, ritual, and restless spirits converged. This is the ancient Ram Inn. Imagine pulling up to the small market town of Wootton-under-Edge. It's picturesque, quiet, the kind of place you might drive through without stopping. But tucked away here lies a timber-framed structure that seems to radiate unease, even in daylight. The ancient Ram Inn, built in 1145, has stood for nearly 9 centuries. Its slanted beams, crooked walls, and sagging roof give it the appearance of a house defying time itself. And perhaps it is. Because within those warped walls, stories claim the veil between the living and the dead has worn very thin. So, let's start with its origins. The ancient Ram Inn was built to house the masons and workers constructing the nearby St. Mary's Church. Later, it became a home for priests. Its very foundations sit on the intersection of 2 ley lines, those mystical alignments some believe conduct spiritual energy. Some even say one of those lines runs directly through Stonehenge. But beneath the inn lies something older. Archaeological findings suggest that the lands once hosted a pagan burial ground, and even rituals of sacrifice. Whether those rituals were meant to honour deities or keep darker forces at bay, we can't know for certain. But if the stories are true, that history has left its mark. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, the Ram became an inn for travellers and tradesmen. Over the centuries, it gained a reputation, first as a rough lodging, later as a place where sinister things seemed to cling. And then, in the late 20th century, the building was purchased by a man named John Humphreys. John would spend the rest of his life both preserving the inn and living with its spirits. More on him soon. So, what exactly haunts the ancient Ram Inn? Where to even begin? One of the most infamous spirits said to linger is that of a young girl named Rosie. She was reportedly murdered in the house centuries ago, possibly a part of a ritual. Visitors often claim to hear her cries or even see her ghostly figure at the top of the stairs. There's also the witch's room. Local legend says that during the witch trials of the 1500s, a woman accused of witchcraft hid in this very room. She was eventually captured and burned at the stake. Guests in the witch's room reported icy drafts, shadowy figures, and even the sensation of being held down while they sleep. And then there's the infamous bishop's room. Many paranormal investigators call it the most haunted part of the house. Tales tell of a monk's ghost, strange lights, and even demonic presences. Some visitors have fled in terror, refusing to stay the night. John Humphreys himself claimed he once encountered an incubus and a succubus malevolent entity, said to attack sleeping victims. He believed they were tied to the inn's violent, ritualistic past. And throughout the building, cold spots, whispers, footsteps, and even a violent physical attack have been reported. Furniture moves on its own, heavy doors slam, guests are awoken with scratches. The ancient Ram Inn doesn't just host the dead, it unsettles the living. Over the years, countless paranormal teams have investigated the Ram Inn. Most Haunted filmed an episode there, with crew members visibly shaken. Ghost Adventures called it one of the darkest places they've ever entered. Visitors have left written accounts describing overwhelming dread, nausea, or the feeling of being watched. Some report being pushed down the stairs. Others hear disembodied voices calling their names. And then, of course, there was John Humphreys himself. He lived alone in the inn from the 1960s until his death in 2017. John became as much part of the legend as the building. He often shared stories of his encounters, shadow figures, violent attacks, and constant disturbances. He believed he was living with dozens of spirits, and yet he refused to leave. Today, the inn is still owned by John Humphreys' family. His daughter, Caroline, she manages visits, tours, and paranormal events. She has her own stories too, often sharing that she's been scratched, heard voices, and felt hands tug at her clothes. Now, as with all haunted locations, it's worth asking, how much is folklore and how much is fact? The ancient Ram Inn's history is undeniably dark. Its location on pagan burial grounds, its connection to witch trials, and its centuries as a rough and tumble inn for travellers. Violence and tragedy are woven into its story. Skeptics will argue that creaking beams, shifting foundations, and the power of suggestion fuel many of the ghostly encounters. After all, a building nearly 900 years old will naturally groan and shudder. But believers counter that the sheer volume of reports, the scratches, the apparitions, and the terrifying experiences of seasoned investigators point to something more. Whether you view it as an active portal of paranormal energy, or simply a fascinating relic with a chilling reputation, the ancient Ram Inn holds its place as one of the most famous haunts in the world. Standing outside the ancient Ram Inn, you can't help but feel a pull. The sagging beams and weathered stones seem to whisper their stories of masons and priests, of witches and bishops, of travellers and victims, of John Humphreys, the man who lived with ghosts until his final days. Is it the most haunted house in Britain? Perhaps. But one thing is certain. Once you step inside, the ancient Ram never quite leaves you. That brings us to the end of today's episode of Your Local Haunt. If you enjoyed exploring the history and horrors of the ancient Ram, leave a review, share with your fellow ghost enthusiasts, and let me know of what haunted location you'd like to hear about next. Until next time, I'm Scott, reminding you every town has its terror, every place has its phantoms, and sometimes the past is never truly the past.